Route 616, your home for all things Marvel main continuity. Not gonna lie, I was waiting for you to say fuck Disney.
I know you were. That's why I was going to say it later, just to throw you off.
That fucked me up. That's why I started giggling when we started.
I knew it was going to.
Oh my.
You're easily trainable.
Apparently. I guess that's a good thing, though. So we are back, as you see, and as we teased on the yesterday's bonus episode. Back and professional as ever. Yes, of course. We are back. This is episode 33. As you see, it's only Bill and I again. We talked about this a little yesterday's bonus episode, which if you haven't seen, it got released on Everything Today. It is about the Alien franchise. We had a lot of fun. Moira was there, had a little fun, but Moira was there to join us as well.
We got more intro on the boobs and Alien than we expected.
Well, there we go. Moira did certainly add to the conversation. Then we talked about our upcoming bonus episodes, which we are, for the next 3 months, we have planned out already. We're going to do an episode next month for February that is about our favorite video games. We're going to do one the next month in March for our least favorite video games that have disappointed us. And then we are going to do an episode on the Sharknado franchise for April. So stay tuned for all of those, because they should be lots of fun. But anyway, we're here to talk about old Marvel comics today. And boy, do we have a lineup today.
These are definitely comics that have been read.
They certainly are. Aren't we happy to have read them?
Actually, I lie. I enjoyed over half of them.
Yeah, to be fair, so did I. It's just, there's nothing really special here, but they're not...
It's just a lot of fine comics.
Exactly.
And Giant Man.
Yes. Yeah, you just covered it perfectly. So today we're going to start off with X-Men issue number 6, and then we're going to go into some Giant Man action with Tales to Astonish 57, which will have our regular A story that's about Giant Man and Wasp. And then we actually get a different Wasp story for the B story. And then we're going to get the A stories for issues 105, 106, and 107 of Journey in the Mystery. So stay tuned for all of that. But anyways, we will start with that X-Men issue that we have spoken about, which is issue number 6. And this one is called Submariner Joins the Evil Mutants. And we
we can overuse two groups at once.
Exactly. Perfect. This is the 3rd issue in a row now that the Evil Mutants have been in X-Men. So I hope you didn't want a new idea.
I did warn that the Evil Mutants would be used to death in early X-Men.
That's true. Bill did warn that. So, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, of course, taking this project to not the heights that it could see, but we'll talk about that some more probably as time goes along.
In your defense, they also haven't taken it to the bottoms that it will see as we go along.
That's also true. Chuck Colson isn't writing.
I was just thinking of The Locust.
Fair enough.
I was only counting until it got canceled the first time.
Chick Stone's inking, which is great. Chick Stone's great. Is great at that. A great inker. Bill and I have both praised his work so far. And Sam Rosen is on letters. This is a May 1964 release, a 22-page story, and I'm going to take this first one. We are going to be going back and forth today, so no special layouts on who's taking what. So, Professor Xavier is reading a newspaper article about the Submariner, and he wonders whether or not the Submariner is a mutant. That is a big part about this issue, of course.
That's the important thing out of this issue, is that they effectively confirm Submariner's a mutant here.
He's essentially, at this point, the first mutant. Meanwhile, Magneto and his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants are now at their headquarters on an island, pondering the same thing. I did not mention I am using the wiki like Dan uses this time again. I'll be switching back and forth throughout these episodes, whether I use the wiki or just going from my notes and stuff. But I want to throw that out there. Magneto now wants to try to recruit Submariner, and he projects his astral form under the ocean. Professor Xavier does the same thing from his mansion, but he hides his astral form when he senses Magneto's astral form nearby.
I have to stop and complain here. This is one of the worst things they did in early superheroes. Astral forms are Doctor Strange's thing.
Yeah, I hated this.
Up until now, it's been entirely something that can only be done by magic users. And then all of a sudden, just randomly, both Magneto and Xavier can do it for no reason. And I don't think either one of them can ever do it again. It just happens in this comic.
Yeah, when that came up in this, and it's like it's got the added aspect of Xavier's spying on the evil guy. I don't know. It just seemed really lame, this whole section of the story.
See, I wouldn't have minded if Xavier used like psychic powers to spy on Magneto.
That's better.
But the fact that they used astral forms, which has been up to this point only Doctor Strange and presumably the Ancient One have been able to do it. So to just have them suddenly have this power really pissed me off.
Yeah, me too. So, I guess we'll move on. Magneto finds Namor's underwater kingdom, but he decides not to approach the Submariner following an outburst that he witnessed. Instead, Magneto approaches one of the other Atlanteans and makes a deal. In exchange for delivering a message from him, Magneto claims that the Atlantean become the new ruler of Atlantis if the Submariner joins the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Pretty good deal, I suppose, if you're a random Atlantean. Back at the mansion, though, we see Professor Xavier inform his students that Magneto is attempting to recruit Namor, and that he knows where Magneto's new base is located. The X-Men board a ship and head out to stop Magneto. Namor is persuaded into meeting with Magneto on a secret island. He is quickly impressed by how the island is run using Magneto's powers in conjunction with a giant magnet at the center of the island. Gotta love that. Giant magnets. I love Stan's writing sometimes. It's so good.
I think that one's a Jack problem.
It could be a Jack problem. He probably drew it, and so Stan had the bullshit.
Because the artist drew the stuff first, and the magnet is definitely visible.
That's something we that's something that could be overlooked easily. Looking back at old Marvels, they had the Marvel way where
Stan would lay out like a rough plot, and then he'd give it to the artist. They'd draw it, and then he'd come back in and fill in the words. Yeah,
good. I'm glad that they evolved past that. Artists can tell good stories, but if you're not really working in conjunction with one another, it's kind of a mess a lot of the time.
Oh, it's hilarious when they're not communicating well, especially when it's on levels of violence, and so someone just like gets shot in the face, and then there's like a speech balloon. Oh, good thing that was a stun gun.
Yeah, that stuff.
And Stan's like, no, you can't kill people. We'll get sued.
So the X-Men arrive, and a battle begins amongst the two groups. We haven't seen this before. Magneto destroys the X-Men ship, but they use an ice craft to make it to shore. I wonder who had a hand in making the ice craft. Cyclops realizes that the giant magnet powers everything, so he tries to destroy it, but Quicksilver attacks before he can do anything. I will say, I like seeing Quicksilver so far. Even like he's not anything special, but it's kind of cool seeing Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch already, and they are kind of different at this point. There's not really a speedster in Marvel here, so he's cool.
And their relationship to the Brotherhood is probably the most interesting thing that's going on in Marvel right now.
It is. That dynamic is actually why the Brotherhood is a little bit worth it.
It's why Stan's overusing the Brotherhood, because he wants to advance the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver storyline.
Yeah, it's
kind of a mixed bag, because that storyline's really good, but it means we get an awful lot of Mastermind.
Yeah. That really is the issue, isn't it?
Because I don't want to shit on Toad, because Toad is hilarious with fawning all over Magneto.
I do like Toad. Like, Toad's a fine character. Like, I understand why he kind of gets buried to time, but, like, and he's just becomes a joke, but...
Future writers don't do Toad well.
Yeah.
Because they don't make him a sniveling crony. Like, he's good, understands writing, because all he does is kiss Magneto's ass in such a transparent manner while Magneto hates him.
Yeah. It's pretty good. I wish that continued through more runs, but anyways. The X-Men subdue Quicksilver, which causes the Scarlet Witch to fear for her brother's safety, naturally. Magneto becomes angered with the Scarlet Witch and yells at her. At this point, both Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch question Magneto's actions, but they continue to follow him. Xavier mentions this may be because they are being controlled subconsciously. So that's an interesting wrench to throw in the equation. Are they being controlled subconsciously to follow Magneto's actions? Will all be. The Submariner realizes what type of man he has allied himself with, so he turns against Magneto and destroys the Magnet's control. The X-Men breaks into the lab, so Magneto, Toad, and Mastermind run away. The Scarlet Witch demands that Quicksilver be returned to her, but the X-Men do not comply. A short battle breaks out and is stopped by Professor Xavier when he brings Quicksilver under his mental control to the Scarlet Witch. Namor decides that he has enough of fighting for the day, so he starts to head back to his... Sounds like Hulk Hogan. So he starts to head back to his kingdom when he is
Gotta
attacked
beat the
by
traffic,
Magneto.
brother.
Name was a real American after all. He is attacked by Magneto and his giant magnet. The Submariner overcomes the beating he has taken and destroys the magnet. The X-Men watch as Submariner withdraws back to his kingdom, then observe Magneto and the rest of the Brotherhood retreat in their own jet plane. Whew, done.
So I have thoughts on this issue.
Long.
Because the fight part... Yes, it is long. The fight is actually really good.
It is.
And we lost Ryan. There he is. Wait. There we go. The fight is actually really good. And probably would have been close to 4 stars. The build-up is atrocious and painful to get through.
Yes.
So I averaged this out to a 3-star book. But I hated reading it.
That's exactly how I felt. This is a 3-star book, but it's just barely a 3-star book.
It's barely a 3-star, mostly because the fight is the closest part to when I rated it. Because I was reading the first half again for this podcast, and I'm thinking, what the fuck was I thinking?
Yeah.
Stanley doesn't even know how ice cream works. Because there's a whole thing where they're eating dinner, and Bobby puts ice on his pie so he has ice cream.
That's incredible. What a guy, Bobby. I just realized I'm looking at that cover more again. We didn't even mention on the podcast how shitty the cover is, but I'm loving looking at it again because they have fucking Jack has the giant magnet right on the cover.
Yeah,
so good.
He was proud of that magnet.
Yeah. No, it's probably the best part of the cover, so good for him, I guess.
Namor's not bad on the cover.
No,
he's
Namor
miscolored,
isn't bad.
But I mean, he's the selling point of this comic. So putting him front and center
makes a lot of sense.
It's a good idea. The big problem is sticking the rest of the Brotherhood in the background. They don't need to be there.
Yeah. I connected them. Like, it makes sense, but they don't really need to be there. Maybe have Magneto there, I don't know, but they don't really need to be.
Even him, just a picture of Submariner and the banner Submariner joins the Evil Mutants. Everyone reading X-Men knows who the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants are. You don't need to show them again.
I'd hope so, yeah. Christ. Well, I guess on that note, let us get into Tales to Astonish, issue number 57. What's going to be our favorite story of the week?
I mean, to be honest, after that X-Men, Tales to Astonish was a bit of a relief.
Yeah, fair. This is the A story, which is called On the Trail of the Amazing Spider-Man. Yeah, Spider-Man's in this issue, but don't be fooled.
Oh yes, it's not as good as a Spider-Man.
Stanley is writing this one, of course. We got Dick Ayers on art, inks by Paul Reinman. The cover's done by Jack Kirby and Saul Brodsky. He's willing to do a cover, but he said, that doesn't work for me, brother. I'm doing interiors.
Yeah. You get the dead giveaway that Jack did the cover because Spider-Man doesn't have the spider on his back.
Yeah, exactly. Jack
never draws
detail.
that.
And Sam Rosen is on letters for this. This is an April 1964 release, a 16-page story. And Bill is going to have the pleasure of, at least Spider-Man's in here.
Yeah. Anyway, this story opens up with Hank presenting Jan with a little wrist-mounted air gun that he's built for her, which is the first version of the Wasp's Sting, as an actual item as opposed to just a pin or whatever she picks up.
That's honestly the best thing that happens in this issue.
Yeah.
I'm glad that she got that.
Yeah, that was an important moment. And then we cut over to an apartment featuring Giant Man's best villain, Egghead. I can't even keep a straight face spelling that.
I was so... You don't know how pumped I was when when Eggman appeared.
No, Eggman would be good, but that's Sonic the Hedgehog. This is Egghead, who is not good. And he has a plot to do something against Giant Man that involves him sending false messages through a relay station he's put on an anthill that will lure Giant Man into a trap. And we cut back to Giant Man and Jan, who hear in a report from their aunts that Spider-Man is searching for them because he wants to defeat Giant Man. So they don't question this at all and set off to fight Spider-Man. And they go their separate ways, with Jan being admonished to not try to fight Spider-Man because she's just a woman and couldn't possibly take him. But she sees him and immediately starts fighting with him and shoots him right in the eye with her air gun, causing Spider-Man to fall off a building. But of course it's Spider-Man, so he just webs onto stuff and swings away. And Jan starts buzzing around and annoying him, so he traps her in some webbing. And Hank realizes that she's trying to fight with Spider-Man, and so heads over there and immediately arrives to start fighting him. In fact, he's still holding onto the ring he uses to swing outside of his apartment, so, really lucky there. And Jan escapes from the webbing as they start fighting. We cut back to Egghead watching them on a screen, and he's got a whole gang of various gangsters together, and he's going to have them go and start robbing stuff in a different part of town, while all the police and so are distracted by the giant superhero fight. So he calls the police, masquerading as a concerned citizen, and sends them over to break up the fight. And so the police show up and don't really know what to do about the fight, so they just kind of watch it, and more cops start arriving, and civilians and everything. And so everyone's there, and Egghead takes his gang of guys and starts robbing stuff on the other side of town. And he ends up stealing an entire payroll truck through some sort of scheme involving magnets. And Spider-Man and Giant Man eventually realize that they've been set up, and neither of them actually wanted to fight the other one. At which point they hear the reports of the robbery, so they immediately team up to go fight the robbers. And they head over, they find the Egghead's guys loading stuff onto a boat, and so they just start fighting with them. This isn't a very interesting issue, if you can't tell. That's
almost an understatement.
Yeah. There's a massive fight. Eventually, all of the gangsters get captured, largely off panel. And then we get Hank and Spider-Man realize that the other isn't too bad and make up. but Jan and Spider-Man absolutely despise each other because wasps and spiders are natural enemies, as we're reminded like 15 times, proving that another thing Stan doesn't understand is entomology.
Yeah.
And Jan and Hank head back to their apartment. Spider-Man swings off towards a much better book, and the story peters out.
I wish I didn't know what you were referencing when you have referenced that before, that Spider-Man and ants are natural enemies.
Not ants, wasps.
Wasp.
He liked Ant-Man.
Yeah, he liked Ant-Man. I'm just thinking of the main character, I guess. But
yeah.
I wish Wasp was the
this
main
would be
character.
a better book
if
if Jan was the main character.
Fuck, I wish. But I guess we'll kind of get a taste of that here in a minute. But before we do, this A story, I gave it a 2.
I gave it a low 3 because it was fine for the first read-through. Like, nothing interesting happened. But nothing really bad happens either. Like, I make fun of the line ants and or spiders and wasps are natural enemies, but that didn't really take me out of it when I was reading it.
I think that bugged me more than it bugged you.
Probably. I just expect Stan to say stupid shit.
Yeah.
I've read
just
his
thought
romance comics where he tries really, really hard to be Abbott and Costello.
Oh, my. I guess I'm be glad I'm not touching the extended order.
Oh yeah, he's convinced he's hilarious with his snappy dialogue, and he's really, really not.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought even Spider-Man couldn't save this for me. I still thought it wasn't that good. This is.
I mean, it's not that good. This is like a 2.6. I'm pretty much right on with what the site ranks it, because they gave it 2.6, and that's about what I thought. But since half stars aren't an option, I had to round up.
Fair enough. Genuinely, Giant Man is by far the worst title. Even Human Torch gets a decent story here and there.
And at least Human Torch is stupidly funny sometimes.
Yeah.
Giant Man is just boring.
Unless he's overthrown a democratic government. Then
okay, that one story was hilariously bad, but the rest of them are just boring.
Just bad and boring. Yeah. Well, on that note, let's not bog ourselves down too much on that. And let's move on to the B story of this one, which will get a little... it technically has a worse average rating, but I think is better. The B story, Tales to Astonish, a voice in the dark. The story is called. Larry is here to co-write and do art. Chick Stone's on inks, and we have Sam Rosen on letters, and this is a 7-page story, and I'm going to take this one.
I gotta say, Larry draws a good Jan.
He does. I kind of wish that he'd stuck to that more. So running late for a meeting with Giant Man, the Wasp decides to save time by throwing a coat over her wasp costume and walking to Henry Pym's house. Along the way, she spots a suspicious-looking man crawling into a manhole. Dismissing it at first, she soon stumbles upon the fact that a local jewelry store has just been robbed. Shrinking down to ant size, the Wasp chases after the crook and tries to take him down in the dark sewers without his notice. Everything failing, she tracks the crook to an abandoned subway maintenance room where she comes up with the idea of amplifying her voice with a scrap of paper folded into a cone shape. I forgot about that little tidbit. She tells the crook that she's the invisible girl, which the crook believes since he can hear a woman but can't see one, and that he should surrender before the rest of the Fantastic Four arrive. The crook quickly surrenders and is arrested. When the Wasp finally arrives at Giant Man's lab, Henry is furious that she's so late. Janet then explains to him what happened, and he gets even madder still that she take credit for a job that the radio reports was done by the Invisible Girl.
Okay, that part was actually kind of funny.
Me too. That was genuinely a funny moment in this comic. I had fun.
Hank is a passive-aggressive dick about it instead of, actually funny, but the idea was hilarious.
Yeah. Generally a funny concept there. And I thought this was just a fun, brief little read. And
it wasn't bad.
I gave it 3 stars. I enjoyed this way more than the main story.
I gave it 2 largely because of how ineffective Jan is in it. Like, she has to pretend to be a different superhero to actually beat the person. And it's not a powered human at all. It's just a guy.
Yeah, when you put it like that, I suppose, but I don't know. Seeing Jan get her own time made me excited, so that might have boosted this too.
I was excited for it, but the fact that she was absolutely useless almost really bugged me. And
Fair
I do
enough.
have to point out, too, this is technically a flashback issue.
Oh.
It's a couple of weeks earlier because Jan doesn't have the sting yet.
Oh, yes, that's true. It does point that out in the comic.
Yeah, so this is technically I think this is our first flashback issue.
Our first flashback issue, of course, that isn't a Sergeant Fury issue, but yeah.
Well, Sergeant Fury is its own timeline.
Yeah, I just realized that when I was saying it. Yeah, it's its own timeline, so that doesn't even count. I think that is our first. There's been
the same as like the. Although I suppose I don't think they're
flashbacks
marked
inside of stories, but they haven't had. We haven't had a full story that's marked, been a whole flashback.
Yeah, they're not marked, but I don't remember them being marked. But all the Tales of Asgard should be flashbacks as well. Actually,
yeah.
I don't remember if they're marked on the site, but they should be because they all take. So far, everyone we've covered has taken place before Thor has come to Earth.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, that's still an interesting note. It's a full story. That it's like a full flashback here, so that is kind of cool. I suppose we'll move on to some Thor now, as we have the rest of this episode is all Thor. So I hope you guys like Thor. We're going to start with Journey.
That's going to be a theme going forward. Thor tends to have big clumps.
He does. This one was a good clump, and it wasn't too large, so I enjoyed this. But we have Journey in the Mystery Issue 105, the A story here, which is called The Cobra and Mister Hyde. And we're going to let Bill take this one, but first I'll cover the credits. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, of course, together here. Kirby hasn't given up on Thor at this point. Inks done by Chick Stone. A great fin again. Artie Simic letters. April 1964 release. An 18-page story, because Thor stories, I think it was announced last issue that Thor was going to be 18 pages going forward.
No, that was Iron Man. I made fun of it because, like, in 6 months or so, Captain America gets half that book, so it doesn't last very long.
Oh yeah, I think Thor's been 18 pages for an issue or two now. So 18 pages here, and then this one's for Bill. Perfect.
All right, and this is Thor faces the Cobra and Mister Hyde, and we start
2 villains.
Yes, we start with proof that Chick Stone and Jack Kirby still cannot draw the current Iron Man face, as we open on the end of an Avengers meeting, because that's not being done to sell comics.
Of course not.
And all the Avengers leave to their personal business, including Thor, who's flying back to Donald Blake's office, and he's being watched by the Cobra, who's lurking on the back of, I guess that's supposed to be the Sears Tower, but I'm not really sure. And Thor sees him and tries to hit him, but the Cobra dodges, and Thor ends up smashing a hole in the wall and then getting shot at with the explosive darts that the Cobra has. And they have gases in them. And they gas him and make him fall off the ledge of the building. But he just throws Mjolnir while he's in the air and flies away hanging onto it. And so Cobra realizes that he needs to get away before Thor comes back and kicks his ass. So he slithers in through the nearest open window, which just happens to lead into the lab of Carl Zabo, who's improving his Hyde formula. And he realizes he has an intruder, So he drinks the formula and turns into Hyde and fights with the Cobra a bit until they realize that they both have mothers named Martha. I mean, they both hate Thor. And so they decide to team up and fight with Thor. And they have a plan to catch him, but we're not going to find out what that is for a bit, because we cut back to Thor arriving in Dawn's office and turning into Dawn. And Jane comes in and asks for the day off or to leave early because she's got a date with some guy tonight. And Dawn lets her go and tells her to have a good time because he doesn't want to give away that she's desperately in love with him, despite the fact that she just made up the date to try to make him jealous. And we cut back to the more interesting story of Hyde and Cobra, who have built a device that will show a person's past when they're zapped with it. And
this was so good.
As is the failing with most scientific Marvel villains, instead of just fucking selling the thing for billions of dollars, they decide to use it for crime. And so they go and they climb up on a building with the intention of catching Thor. And so we cut back to Dawn, who's listening to the radio, and hears a report of Hyde rampaging through the city. So he turns into Thor and goes to fight with Hyde. And Hyde runs away and turns back into Zabo in the crowd because Thor doesn't know what he looks like. And so he can just slink off into the crowd. And so Thor's like, I guess he got away, and goes to fly back. But Cobra zaps him with the machine and starts watching it all the way back to him leaving from the window of Don Blake's office, which, despite being many stories in the air with no ledge outside of it, has his name and office hours posted on it. And they become frustrated that they can't see any further back because apparently the machine doesn't realize that Dawn and Thor are the same person either. But they realize they have enough information to track down Thor. And so we cut back to Dawn in his office, and he's decided that if he can't have Jane as Thor, he'll just stop being Thor and date her that way. So he locks his cane in a closet and just decides to quit cold turkey. But as soon as he does it and grabs a painting or picture of Jane to feel sorry over some more, Hyde and Cobra bust in and threaten him into contacting Thor for them. And we cut over to Jane, who actually did have a date, or got one at this point, and she realizes it doesn't work because she's really in love with Dawn, and so she leaves and goes to the office, where she's captured by Hyde and used to threaten Dawn into telling them where Thor is. And so Dawn's like, fine, I have a secret way to capture Thor. You just need to get that stick out of my cabinet and bang it on the ground, and that will summon Thor for you. And so they go and they get Dawn's walking stick out of the cabinet and bang it on the ground, and there's a bright flash. Dawn turns into Thor and summons Mjolnir to his hand before any of them realize what happened. And they're Hyde's convinced that he must have accidentally dropped the cane out of the window. And they turn around and see Thor, and they're like, where did you come from? Even though he's standing exactly where Dawn was standing. And he just points at the open door behind him, and he's like, I just came in through that door after Donald Blake ran away while you were distracted. And so he starts fighting with them as Thor while Jane's just like trying to stay out of the way. And they split up and run away in different directions. And Thor starts chasing after Hyde, who's sneaking through a junkyard. And he sees Thor coming, and so he gets a giant magnet device he had and tries to magnet Mjolnir to him, but it doesn't work. So Thor just chases him some more, and he ends up fleeing into a machine show. And Thor chases him in there until he starts flinging bits of machines at people to distract him. And so Thor is like, well, I can't keep chasing him because he's going to hurt someone. And while Thor's sitting there having a crisis about how to deal with fighting with Hyde in a room full of innocent bystanders, Cobra just sneaks into a machine behind him and uses the grabby hand to pull Mjolnir out of his hand and stick it in the locked compartment. And then they both go to fight Thor, who they figure they can take now that he doesn't have his hammer. And Thor's all like, oh shit, in 60 seconds I'm going to turn back into Don Blake, what do I do? And we have a cliffhanger.
Yes, another cliffhanger so soon. It's pretty incredible.
Thor's really their test case for, like, ongoing storylines.
Yeah, Thor, they do a lot of innovative stuff in Thor. I enjoyed this.
This was way better than a book featuring Cobra and Hyde as the featured villains had any right to be.
Exactly. I like Hyde a little more, but Cobra grew on me here too. Together, bringing them together made them less insufferable, I guess.
Yeah, they're better together than they are on their own.
Yeah. Even though they don't really belong together, but they make that a part of the story. So.
Yeah, the fact that they don't work and just decide to team up because since they both hate Thor, they must be best friends now.
Yeah. Exactly. And simple concepts like that work sometimes, and it worked here. I mean, I probably wouldn't go for the trouble of reading this again, but it was fun while I was reading it.
It's not bad the second time either. Like, you wouldn't want to read it immediately after you read it again, but
yeah. Coming
back to it, I didn't have any less fun reading it the second time because, and this is one of the things they've been doing well with Thor with versus the other stuff, they don't try to do too much. A lot of the other books, like 15 things happen on a page, and so they've got the tiny little panels, and they fill them up with words. Exactly. And they fill them up with a ton of words because they're trying to tell, a 35-page story in 16 pages. And it doesn't work. Thor, they've got good pacing, so, like, this is a pretty minor story of just Thor having to fight a couple of reoccurring villains. But it doesn't feel bad to read through.
Fair enough. That was a pretty solid explanation. I guess we'll move on to the part 2 here as we go on the journey in the mystery number 106 A story, which is titled The Thunder God Strikes Back. This one has, I think, the exact same team. Yeah, the exact same team. So we will just move right into it. This is a May 1964 release, an 18-page story again, and I will take the second part here. Of course, in the last issue, we know what happened in the last issue. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. So, of course, this issue picks up mere moments after the last issue story, where Thor's 60-second time
Before you start on this one, I want to point out on the cover, Stan throwing shade on another book he writes on. Our pledge to you, if you don't like this epic battle, you might enjoy Millie the Model.
Oh yeah, I had a note about that too.
Stan fucking writes Millie the Model. He's throwing shade at his own writing.
That's incredible. So, this issue, of course, picks up mere moments after the last issue story, where Thor's 60-second time limit is rapidly running out. Causes a quick distraction, Thor hides in the fleeing crowd of bystanders, just as he is forced to change into Dr. Blake. As police surround the show building, Blake is unable to retrieve his walking stick from the machine, and thus cannot change back into Thor. When Mister Hyde threatens to attack the crowd if Thor doesn't reappear, Blake offers to find Thor for them if they will retrieve his walking stick from the machine. When the Cobra fails to retrieve it, which is kind of a funny bit because Cobra and Mister Hyde are they're just making comments back and forth a bit. Mr. Hyde rips open the machine and gives Blake his cane. Blake charges into the crowd again.
I have to ask here, how fucking stupid are they?
really stupid.
They put Mjolnir in that machine.
Yeah.
How do they not figure it out?
Yeah, no. This is a big what the fuck, how do you not put two and two together? But Blake charges the crowd again and uses their flee and panic for cover as he changes back into Thor. During his battle against both the Cobra and Mister Hyde, the police storm the building, just as Thor has his foes on the ropes. Mister Hyde escapes by changing to his alter ego of Kelvin Sabo. After the Cobra is apprehended by the police, Thor searches for Mister Hyde, little knowing that Hyde, as Sabo, is following him. Sabo changes back into his guise as Mister Hyde and attacks Thor when he least expects it, knocking Thor's hammer from his hand. Thor decides that he can defeat Mister Hyde with his bare hands before the 60-second limit on his powers runs out. Thor takes advantage of Mister Hyde's temper to defeat him and then turns him over to the police. Changing back to Donald Blake, Thor returns to his office to spend time with Jane Foster. Jane storms out on Blake after hearing on television the story of how Blake betrayed Thor by aiding Mister Hyde and the Cobra. Slamming the door behind him, Foster leaves Blake wondering about the price he paid in order to defeat his foes. It's pretty simple but effective.
This book's just a fight.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's a good fight, but it's just a fight.
I gave this one 3 too.
So did I. I enjoyed this. I think I actually like this one slightly more than the first part.
Me too.
But it's nothing happens in it. It's just a fight. The first one's all set up, and they just fight here.
No, but weirdly enough, this is probably one of the better conclusions to a two-parter they've done so far. So.
Oh yeah, they did. They actually had to fix the hammer in the machine problem instead of what they usually do, where whatever cliffhanger they had is resolved literally 2 panels into the next story.
Yeah.
Like, they actually had to spend a couple of pages. And I liked that they had the guts to have Cobra captured like 6 pages into the story.
Yeah, that was kind of surprising, but that was cool.
Yeah, I figured they'd have both of them together right till the end. So to have one of them get captured and the other one just fuck off and not even try to help him was a really good twist.
And for fans of this duo that we've talked about in this two-parter of Mister Hyde and Cobra, don't worry, they'll be back real soon in issue 110. I also meant to tease earlier that Egghead will be back soon in issue 61, so don't worry if you want to see him again.
One of those returns is actually good.
Oh, Egghead. I keep saying Eggman. Egghead, I'm guessing is the one you mean. Not that one, really? You sure?
Not that one. That's when Giant Man starts getting really bad.
I can't imagine, because it's already so bad. We're about to reach
the last
low
couple
next
of Giant Mans before it gets canceled are truly something.
Oh, nice. Well, I can't wait to reach those, I suppose. But for now, let's move into our main event of the week as we talk about Journey into Mystery number 107, the A story, of course, which is called When the Grey Gargoyle Strikes. This is Stanley and Jack Kirby again, of course. We've got Chick Stone. This is the exact same team, but I'll run through it quick. Chick Stone helping on the cover and just inking in general. And letters by Artie Simic. This is a June 1964 release, an 18-page story, and I'm gonna let Bill have the pleasure of taking this one, which is actually not too sarcastic this time.
Yeah, no, I actually like Grey Gargoyle.
A little too much, possibly.
Yeah, this story opens with a recap of what happened at the end of the last issue, and Don Blake is moping about how Jane doesn't love him anymore because he betrayed himself to his enemies. And so he decides that he won't mope anymore. He'll go out and beat someone up or so to feel better. So he turns into Thor, and immediately Jane walks into the office and sees him there. And she's like, "What are you doing here?" So he has to cover quickly. So he's like, "I came to beat up Don Blake for betraying me." And Jane won't tell him where Blake is, because she's realized that she still loves Blake, even though he may have set Thor up. And so Thor promises that since she loves him, he won't kill him. And flies off and immediately starts celebrating about how she loves him and annoying random passerbys by flying around them and yelling at them about how he's in love. And one of the things he harasses is an airplane that lands at the local airport, and one guy gets off it. And so the attendant's surprised that no one else is getting off the plane. So he goes onto the plane and finds that every single person on there has been turned to stone. And we see the guy that got off the plane now in a taxi, and he's reminiscing about what happened to him. And he used to be a chemist in Paris who was doing some experiments and spilled chemicals on his hand that turned it into stone. And then when he touched it with his other hand, that turned into stone too. So he did what anyone would do in that circumstance and put his face in his hands, turning his face into stone as well.
Of course.
And he realizes that when he's turned to stone, he can still move. But anyone else he touches turns to stone for several hours and can't move. They're just pure stone. So he does what anyone who has an unfortunate event and not a comic book named after them in Marvel does, and becomes a villain. And so he starts using his stone power to rob all sorts of people. And one day he's sitting there reading a newspaper article about Thor beating Cobra and Mister Hyde, and decides that he has to go and fight Thor. So having reached his destination, he turns the cab driver to stone instead of paying him, and gets out. And we see Thor still flying around and hearing news reports on people's radios about all these people being turned to stone. And so he flies over to investigate. And yes, he's doing an awful lot of flying of the sort that you shouldn't be able to do when your aerial transportation is technically just being pulled by the momentum of your hammer that you have previously flung. But we're not going to question that. And so he is Thor, convinces the police to, instead of sending the stone cab driver to the hospital to get help, to take him over to Donald Blake's office to have a series of unethical and probably illegal experiments run on him.
My favorites.
And so Don starts poking around at him and realizes that he's definitely still alive and will at some point probably turn back into a human, so he doesn't have to do anything. And we cut back over to the weird Frenchman, who's now putting on a strange-looking gargoyle costume, and then turns himself into stone, except for the gloves and the blue gloves and booties he's wearing that remain cloth for some strange reason, but he can pass his stone powers through them. None of this is explained.
I love this.
And so he goes and breaks into Don Blake's office and menaces him by making a paper airplane and then turning it to stone and flinging it at his head.
You know what it is? Obviously, just like lightning, stone must not stone must not be able to corrupt the rubber.
Apparently not.
He was wearing rubber.
Yeah. And so Don Blake does what any sensible person would do if this happens, and runs the fuck away. And the Grey Gargoyle starts chasing him. And so he goes up onto the roof and turns into Thor. And Gargoyle's decided to ambush him by crawling up the side of the building and surprising him. But Thor just hits him in the fucking face with his hammer when he comes up over the edge of the building. And so he falls off the building, but grabs a hold of a gargoyle on the way down until Thor just throws his hammer and smashes the gargoyle off the side of the building. Apparently he's just decided to murder today.
Apparently, yeah.
But Grey Gargoyle is part cat and lands on his feet in the street and is completely fine because he's, made out of stone, and just starts running away. And he manages to make a spark with his stone hands and set off a gas pump explosion that stuns Thor and knocks Mjolnir from his hand. So Grey Gargoyle tries to pick it up, which goes as well as you'd expect. And Thor just yoinks it away from him. But when he's grabbing it away, Grey Gargoyle is able to touch him and turn him to stone. And just then, the whole police force shows up armed with flamethrowers and starts trying to barbecue the Grey Gargoyle, forcing him to run away, as the stone Thor just falls over. And as he falls, his hammer strikes the ground, and he turns back into Don Blake. And he's not stoned anymore because apparently when he transforms, since it's a different body, it's immune, the stone isn't in effect. So he starts trying to figure out how he can beat Grey Gargoyle as Don Blake, because if he turns back into Thor before the time elapses, he'll turn to stone again. I don't know how he knows this, but he does. And so he calls up the Avengers and asks them for some favors. And they agree. And so he gets a camera projector thing, and mounts it on the handlebars of Steve Rogers' motorcycle. It doesn't say it, but I just assume he stole about Steve Rogers' motorcycle and jacket based on the way the next couple of panels are drawn. And starts driving along with this projector projecting an image of Thor in front of him. And Grey Gargoyle sees this illusory Thor flying through the air and starts chasing it because he's like, how the hell did he get away? And so he starts flinging shit at Thor, trying to knock him out of the sky, but the Thor illusion dodges and flings his hammer at Grey Gargoyle. And Grey Gargoyle tries to catch it, but it goes right through his hands because it's not real. And so Grey Gargoyle realizes that he must be getting tricked by Dawn, and so he gets into a van and starts trying to run him over. So Dawn drives the motorcycle off the dock, and Gargoyle chases him in this van and falls into the water as well. And Dawn swims away, but Grey Gargoyle sinks because he's made out of stone. And so Dawn dries off and goes back to the office the next day as Thor, and he tells Jane how, he wants to talk. Tells Jane he wants to talk to Dawn, but Jane tells him he's not here today, and hands him the newspaper with the story of Dawn sinking Grey Gargoyle into the ocean. And so Thor's like, maybe he's braver than I thought, and he flies off smugly into the sunset, and that's the end of the story.
Oh, what a good time! This was stupid fun.
It really was, and I like that Dawn was the one to actually solve the problem.
Yeah, that was also... I guess if we gotta have him around, he might as well be useful every so often.
Exactly. It's much better to have this than his usual pining over Jane and then turning into Thor until he turns back at an inopportune moment.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see something real fast here. Oh, we have to wait till issue 113 for Grey Gargoyle to return. That's a bit longer.
That's not that long.
It's not that long, but, could have been quicker.
Yeah.
Oh, Grey Gargoyle was great, though.
Yeah.
It's a stupid film, but it's a fun stupid.
Yeah, and he's unique. He has an actually dangerous, unique power. If they ever put Gargoyle against someone that's not Thor, he could be a real problem because they won't have the changing form out.
Yeah, no, that's a solid point. I gave this one a 3.
So did I.
Which is the slight average too, and yeah, I just had fun with this one. So nothing really to say besides that. Do you have anything else to say on that one?
Not really. This is a really fun story, but it's definitely a filler issue.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's just really to transfer Thor from the Hyde and Cobra arc to the Hyde and Cobra arc. I think it literally is Hyde and Cobra again next.
No, the 110 they came back, so we got a couple issues there. I think a new villain's introduced to her in a two-parter or something like that.
Yeah. It's our other returning antagonist.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just realized who it is.
It's Loki.
Yeah, it is Loki. I mean, it's been a little bit actually, so that's fine.
Yeah, it's Loki and then Magneto, the fill that he has.
That's not too bad. And
Loki's been gone long enough that it's not a big issue that he's showing back up, and Magneto has never faced Thor, so that's kind of fun.
That'll be interesting. So yeah, good stuff coming up in Thor by the looks of it. But for next week's episode, we have we have stuff to cover. Some of it's the first stretch is pretty good, and then a decent story near the end. But we have the B stories, so all three of these Journey in the Mystery issues we just covered, so 105, 106, and 107. The first one is a Heimdall one. These are all Tales of Asgard, so they're 5 pages. First one's about Heimdall, and the other two about Balder the Brave. Then we have Tales through Astonish issue number 58, the A story being about the coming of Colossus. No, not that Colossus.
That would actually be good, but it's not that one.
Then we have the B story.
It's also not the Living Colossus, which would also be better.
Yeah.
And when you finally get to those stories, Ryan, you'll realize how low praise that actually is.
Then we have the B story, which is a never watched story, but not as good as The Magician Appears. You remember
that immediately lowers it. But hey, at least she's taken someone with actual powers this time.
Yeah. Still not good.
Yeah, no, it's
we'll
not.
We'll get to that. Tales of Suspense, number 56, will end us off. As first, we have the A story, the Iron Man story, where he faces a new villain called the Unicorn. Not as bad as it sounds.
Yeah, I like to make fun of Unicorn, but he's actually not a bad villain.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then the B story will end us off, which is a 5-page Watcher story called The Watcher's Sacrifice. What will he sacrifice? We'll find out.
I know I'll be sacrificing at least 5 minutes of my time to read it. Again.
Yeah. That's the biggest sacrifice of the of the occasion. Oh shit. Well, hopefully next week we'll actually have Dan for the first time in the year on this main podcast, but we'll see.
Oh, with the shit we're going to be shoveling through next week, he better not get out of it.
Yeah. He's just he's been working, but really his team's been doing really bad, so he's probably hiding a little bit.
It's the combination of the mockery he'll endure for that and the fact that he knows we're talking about Spider-Man.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, if you're watching this here on YouTube, please subscribe, comment, even share if you'd like to. Tune back next week for that episode. There's going to be some fun stuff to talk about. Whether it's good or not is another story.
Spoiler, it's not.
If it's Giant Man, it sure isn't.
Oh god, I hate that Giant Man so much.
It's the lowest point of the series so far, and if it gets lower than that, I don't know how. I think there's an Egghead
story later,
but
that's a lower point.
That's incredible. So,
because at least this Giant Man has decent art.
That's fair enough. So yeah, we are also available on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, of course. Let us know in the poll what your favorite story was of this episode, and tell us why it was the Wasp story, or tell us why it was Giant Man. Anyway, guys, we will see you all in the next episode, and peace out.
Have a good one, everyone.